The acid rain hissed against the reinforced viewport of Jackson Reed's salvage ship as he carefully maneuvered through the toxic atmosphere of Helios 7. The planet's perpetual storms cast everything in a sickly amber glow, making it difficult to distinguish valuable salvage from worthless debris. But that's exactly why Jackson chose to work here. Few others were desperate or skilled enough to brave these conditions. Warning, atmospheric toxicity levels critical, his ship's AI announced in its maddeningly calm voice. Jackson adjusted his environmental suit seals for the third time that hour. I'm aware, Arya. Just need to check one more wreck. The aging salvage pilot had been tracking a particularly promising signal for the past hour. Something about it felt different from the usual abandoned cargo containers and derelict ships that dotted this hazardous world. The signal led him to a narrow valley between towering rock formations. There, partially hidden by centuries of acidic erosion, lay the remains of what appeared to be a research station. But what caught his attention was the faint blue glow emanating from within. Jackson landed his ship as close as he safely could and double-checked his suit's integrity. Arya, maintain position and be ready for emergency takeoff. He grabbed his salvage kit and rescue beacon, standard procedure, even though he'd never found anyone alive out here. The moment he stepped outside, the caustic wind buffeted him like a physical force. Through the swirling toxins, he made his way to the structure's entrance. The blue glow grew stronger as he approached, pulsing with an almost organic rhythm. That's when he saw her. Curled in a protective ball near a broken stasis pod lay a humanoid figure. Her skin had a subtle iridescent quality, and delicate patterns traced their way across her exposed arms like living circuitry. Most striking were the crystalline structures protruding from her shoulders and spine. They were the source of the blue glow, though it was fading rapidly. Jackson's suit sensors indicated she was still alive, barely. Without intervention, she had minutes at most in this toxic environment. He had a choice to make: leave her and salvage what he could from the station, or risk bringing an unknown alien aboard his ship. Well, shit. He activated his rescue beacon and knelt beside her. Hey, can you hear me? Her eyes snapped open, solid silver with no visible pupils. She spoke in a language his translator couldn't process, then went limp again. Jackson carefully lifted her, noting how her crystalline protrusions seemed to pulse in response to his touch. Arya, prep the medbay and run full decontamination protocols. We've got company. Getting her back to the ship through the storm was a nightmare. Twice he nearly lost his footing on the corroded ground, and his suit's integrity warning began blaring in the final stretch. But finally, they made it inside. As the decontamination sequence ran, Jackson studied his unexpected passenger through the medbay window. Her crystalline structures had dimmed to an almost imperceptible glow, but her vital signs were stabilizing. He'd seen many alien species in his years as a salvager, but nothing quite like her. Initial analysis complete, Arya announced. Subject appears to be Luminari, a species previously believed extinct. Warning, multiple Federation protocols prohibit harboring members of quarantined species. Jackson pulled off his helmet and ran a hand through his graying hair. Of course they do, because this day wasn't complicated enough already. He watched as the medical systems worked to stabilize her. What's the nearest safe port where I won't get arrested for having her aboard? Processing query. Alert. Unknown vessel detected entering atmosphere. Jackson rushed to the cockpit. Through the storm, he could make out the sleek shape of a military-grade ship. Its design was unlike anything in his database, but its intentions were clear as it moved to intercept their position. He had another choice to make. The right thing to do was probably to turn her over to whoever was looking for her. The smart thing was to stay out of what was clearly a complicated situation. Jackson had never been particularly good at doing either the right thing or the smart thing. Arya, fire up the engines. Let's show them why they call this ship the Phantom. Phantom lived up to its name as Jackson guided it through the toxic storm, using the planet's natural interference to mask their signature. The pursuing vessel was faster and better armed, but Jackson had something they didn't: decades of experience flying in conditions that would make most pilots quit on the spot. They're maintaining pursuit, Arya reported. Ship configuration suggests hegemony design. The hegemony, Jackson muttered. What would they want with? He glanced back toward the medbay where his mysterious passenger lay unconscious. The crystalline formations on her body had begun to pulse again, stronger this time. A warning klaxon blared through the ship. Life support malfunction detected, Arya announced. Atmospheric processors showing rapid deterioration. Jackson swore under his breath. The caustic atmosphere must have damaged something during their hasty takeoff. He activated the ship's autopilot and rushed to the maintenance access panel, pulling it open to reveal a mess of corroded components. Behind him, he heard movement. The Luminari stood in the medbay doorway, supporting herself against the frame. Her silver eyes fixed on him with an unsettling intensity. Look, Jackson said. I don't know if you can understand me, but we've got problems. She tilted her head slightly, then moved forward with surprising grace despite her obvious weakness. Her crystalline protrusions brightened as she approached the damaged systems. Hey, wait, Jackson started to protest, but stopped as she placed her hand on the corroded metal. The crystals on her body pulsed, and to his amazement, the corrosion began to recede. Within moments, the atmospheric processor hummed back to life. Atmospheric systems restored, Arya confirmed. Unknown biological process detected. The Luminari turned to Jackson. When she spoke, her words came through his translator this time. Your assistance was unexpected. I have returned the favor. You can talk now? Jackson asked, even as he checked the restored systems. Everything looked better than new. Your ship's language database is primitive but sufficient. I am Nyx. She swayed slightly, the glow of her crystals dimming. The process of purifying your systems has depleted me. Jackson caught her before she could fall. Yeah, well, maybe don't push yourself after nearly dying. I'm Jackson. Want to tell me why the hegemony is so interested in you? Nyx's expression hardened. They believe I possess something valuable, knowledge that could shift the balance of power in this sector. She looked at him carefully. You should surrender me to them. It would be the logical choice. Lady, if I made logical choices, I wouldn't be flying salvage runs on toxic planets. Jackson helped her to a seat as the ship shuddered from another burst of turbulence. Besides, I've dealt with the hegemony before. They're not exactly known for their fair treatment of, well, anyone. A ghost of a smile crossed Nyx's face. No, they are not. She touched one of her crystals thoughtfully. My people were known for our ability to manipulate organic and synthetic materials at a molecular level. The hegemony wished to weaponize this ability. And you disagreed. I was lead researcher at a facility studying applications for healing, for restoration of damaged environments. Her silver eyes darkened. When I discovered the truth about how my work was being used, I destroyed everything. They intended to execute me, but they wanted to make it look like an accident, Jackson finished. That's why they left you on that death world. He checked their trajectory. They had some distance on their pursuers, but not much. So what's the plan? Keep running. Nyx straightened, her crystals brightening slightly. No, I need to reach the archive station in the Meridian sector. There, I can expose what the hegemony is doing, prove that they're violating multiple Federation treaties. The Meridian sector? Jackson laughed. That's on the other side of hegemony space. It's suicide. Then leave me at the next port. You have already done more than. An explosion rocked the ship, cutting her off. Direct hit to rear shields, Arya reported. Multiple hegemony vessels now in pursuit. Jackson strapped himself into the pilot's seat. Better hold on to something. This is going to get interesting. He glanced at Nyx. And we'll talk about that suicide mission after we survive this. The Phantom dove into a massive storm cell, lightning crackling around them as Jackson pushed the ship to its limits. Behind them, the hegemony vessels followed, their weapons lighting up the toxic clouds. Nyx watched him work with obvious fascination. You are either very skilled or very foolish. Probably both, Jackson admitted, threading the ship between two massive rock formations. But I've got a feeling helping you might be the most interesting thing I've done in years. The abandoned mining station hung in the shadow of a massive asteroid, its darkened corridors and powered-down systems making it nearly invisible to casual scans. Jackson guided the Phantom into a maintenance dock, the ship's systems powering down to minimal levels as they settled into their temporary hiding place. "Charming location," Nix observed, her crystalline protrusions providing the only significant light in the darkness. "I assume this is another of your questionably legal salvage sites." Jackson ran a diagnostic on their damaged systems. Former client owned it, went bankrupt after the ore ran out but never bothered to report it to the authorities. He glanced at her glowing form. "Any chance you could dim those a bit? Kind of defeats the purpose of hiding." Nix concentrated and the blue glow faded to a subtle shimmer. "The crystals respond to energy levels around them. Your ship systems are fascinating. I've never seen modifications quite like these." "That's because most of them aren't exactly standard." Jackson pulled up a holographic display of their route. "We lost the hegemony patrols for now, but getting to the Meridian sector won't be easy. We'll need supplies, information, and probably a few favors." A slight frown crossed Nix's features. "You still intend to help me, even knowing the danger?" "Well, I could go back to salvaging toxic wreckage, but exposing a corrupt alien empire sounds more interesting." He gave her a crooked smile. "Besides, you've already saved my ship twice. Figure I owe you." Their conversation was interrupted by Arya's alert. "Multiple ships approaching. Configuration matches independent salvage vessels." Jackson moved to the viewport, watching as 3 ships emerged from behind the asteroid. "Scavengers, they probably detected our energy signature when we docked." He turned to Nix. "How are you in a fight?" "I prefer to avoid violence," she said, but her crystals pulsed with increased intensity. "However, I am capable of defending myself if necessary." "Good to know." Jackson checked his weapon, an old but well-maintained plasma pistol. "Because these folks aren't known for taking no for an answer." The sound of cutting tools against the station's hull echoed through the structure. Jackson moved to a defensive position near the airlock, while Nix melted into the shadows, her crystalline glow now completely dimmed. The outer door breached with a hiss of escaping air. 3 figures entered in environmental suits, weapons raised. Their leader, a bulky human with cybernetic augmentations visible through his faceplate, stepped forward. "Well, well, Jackson Reed." The man's voice crackled through his suit's speaker. "Still flying that piece of junk ship, I see. Hand over any valuables and maybe we'll let you keep enough fuel to reach the nearest port." Jackson kept his weapon steady. "Marcus, still robbing honest salvagers instead of doing your own work." "Honest?" Marcus laughed. "That's rich coming from you. We picked up some interesting chatter about your ship. Seems the hegemony's offering a nice reward for information about you and your passenger." The temperature in the station suddenly dropped. Frost began forming on the walls as Nix stepped out of the shadows, her crystals blazing with cold light. "I recommend you reconsider your current course of action." Marcus and his crew took an involuntary step back as the metal floor beneath their feet began to crystallize. "What the hell?" "The Luminari were known for more than just healing," Nix said quietly. "We learned to manipulate matter because we had to survive environments far more hostile than this. Would you like a demonstration?" The scavengers' weapons began to crack, ice forming in their mechanisms. Marcus raised his hands slowly. "Look, maybe we can work something out. The hegemony doesn't need to know about this." "You're right, they don't," Jackson said. "Because if they did, they might ask how you knew where to find us. And then they might start wondering about all those salvaged hegemony goods you've been selling." Marcus's augmented eye twitched. "You always were too clever for your own good, Reed." He gestured to his crew. "We're leaving, but watch your back. There are others who won't be so easily deterred." After the scavengers retreated, Nix released her hold on the temperature, the ice quickly melting away. She swayed slightly from the effort, and Jackson steadied her with a concerned look. "That was impressive," he said, "and a little terrifying." "My abilities are not unlimited," she admitted. "Each use depletes energy that must be replenished, but I judged a demonstration would be more effective than actual violence. Jackson nodded thoughtfully. Smart, but Marcus was right about one thing: others will come. We need to move soon. He studied their navigation charts. I might know someone who can help us get through hegemony space, an old friend who runs a trading post in the Outer Rim, assuming she's still speaking to me. You seem to have many complicated relationships, Nix observed. Hazard of the job. Jackson began powering up the Phantom systems. Let's just hope she's willing to hear us out before she shoots me. As they prepared to leave their temporary sanctuary, Nix placed a hand on the ship's console. Her crystals pulsed briefly, and several damaged systems suddenly reported full functionality. A small thanks, she said in response to Jackson's questioning look, for continuing to help despite the risk. Jackson grinned. You know, I'm starting to think this partnership might work out after all. The Phantom slipped away from the mining station, vanishing into the vast darkness of space. Behind them, Marcus's ship transmitted a coded message to a heavily encrypted channel. The hunt was far from over. The Crossroads trading station lived up to its name, a sprawling collection of interconnected habitats and docking rings where ships from a dozen different systems mingled freely. Jackson guided the Phantom through the busy traffic, ignoring the suspicious looks from the station's security vessels. Your friend runs this place? Nix asked, her crystalline structures dimmed to avoid attention. Runs might be a strong word. Nova pretty much keeps the whole thing from falling apart through sheer force of will. Jackson transmitted their docking codes. We served together in the Federation fleet before. Well, before a lot of things went wrong. The docking bay they were directed to was private, separated from the main traffic. As they landed, a tall woman with close-cropped silver hair and an array of neural implants along her temple waited for them. Her expression was unreadable. Jackson Reed, she called out as they descended the ship's ramp. I should probably shoot you. Probably, Jackson agreed, but maybe hear us out first. Nova's cybernetic eyes scanned over Nix, widening slightly at the sight of her crystalline formations. A luminari. Well, that explains the hegemony bounty notices. She gestured for them to follow. Come on, my office is secure. They walked through maintenance corridors, avoiding the station's main thoroughfares. Nova's office was a cluttered space filled with holographic displays and monitoring equipment. She sealed the door behind them. You've got maybe 10 minutes before someone reports your presence, she said, dropping into a chair. Make them count. Jackson started to speak, but Nix stepped forward. The hegemony is developing biological weapons using corrupted versions of my people's technology. I have proof that could expose them to the Federation Council. Nova's expression hardened. The hegemony has half the council in their pocket. You'd need something extraordinary to make them act. Show her, Jackson said quietly. Nix hesitated, then raised her hand. Her crystals pulsed, and a hidden data core emerged from her palm, constructed from living crystal. This contains everything. Research logs, test results, genetic sequences. They thought they destroyed it all but my people's technology. She smiled slightly. It's more resilient than they understood. Nova studied the crystal with obvious fascination. That would do it, but getting to Meridian, she activated a holographic map. The hegemony's locked down most direct routes you'd need. The station shuddered violently, alarms blaring through the corridors. Nova's displays lit up with warning signals. Multiple hegemony warships dropping out of hyperspace, she reported, fingers flying over controls. They're demanding immediate station shutdown and compliance with search protocols. Jackson drew his weapon. Looks like Marcus sold us out to more than one buyer. Marcus, Nova's eyes narrowed. That explains the encrypted transmission burst we detected. She hit a series of commands, and hidden panels in the office walls slid open. There's a maintenance shaft that leads to the secondary docking ring. I can get your ship transferred there. You're helping us? Jackson asked. I thought. You thought I was still angry about what happened on Titan Prime? Nova smiled grimly. Oh, I am, but I hate the hegemony more. She tossed him a data chip. Emergency codes for the outer markers. They might give you a chance. Another explosion rocked the station. Nyx stumbled, her crystals flaring brightly. "They're using sonic disruptors. They're trying to disable me." Jackson caught her before she fell. "The crystals are sensitive to certain frequencies," she explained through gritted teeth. "A weakness they discovered during their experiments." Nova cursed. "They're not just here to capture you. They want to make sure you can't expose them ever." She drew her own weapon. "Go, I'll slow them down." Nova, Jackson started. "We both know I'm good at covering retreats," she cut him off. "Besides, you owe me now, I'll collect someday." They could hear boots in the corridor outside. Jackson helped Nyx toward the maintenance shaft as Nova took up a defensive position. "The secondary docking ring has minimal security," Nova called after them. "But watch for hegemony drop ships. They'll be expecting you to run." The maintenance shaft was narrow and dark, lit only by the pulsing glow of Nyx's crystals. She was weakening, each sonic blast from above making her crystals dim further. "The disruptors," she gasped. "They're affecting the data core if it destabilizes." "That's not happening," Jackson said firmly. "We didn't come this far to fail now." He activated his communicator. "Arya, initiate emergency launch sequence and run every interference pattern you've got. Let's give them something to chase." They emerged into the secondary docking ring just as another blast shook the station. Through the viewport, they could see hegemony troops rappelling onto the outer hull, cutting their way in. "I hope your ship is as good as you claim," Nyx said as they ran toward the Phantom. Jackson grinned despite the situation. "Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet." Above them, Nova watched on her monitors as multiple targets converged on the Phantom's position. She opened a secure channel to the ship. "Jackson," she said quietly, "the Meridian route is compromised, but there might be another way." She transmitted a set of coordinates. "An old smuggler's run through the Void Reach. It's dangerous as hell, but—" "But they won't expect it," Jackson finished. "Thanks, Nova, try not to die." "Try not to need saving again?" she shot back, then turned to face the approaching hegemony forces. Her neural implants glowed as she accessed the station's defense systems. She might not be able to stop them, but she could certainly make them work for it. The Phantom lifted off as explosions bloomed across the station. Jackson's hands flew over the controls, pushing the ship to its limits as they dove into the chaos of combat. The Void Reach lived up to its name, a twisted maze of spatial anomalies and quantum distortions that most pilots wouldn't go near on a bet. The Phantom's sensors could barely penetrate the swirling darkness ahead, and what readings they did get made little sense. "Multiple gravitational anomalies detected," Arya reported. "Navigation systems experiencing significant interference." Jackson's hands were steady on the controls despite the ship's constant shuddering. "That's why they call it the Void Reach. No nav computer can map it properly. You have to feel your way through." Nyx sat in the co-pilot's seat, her crystals pulsing weakly. The sonic attacks had taken their toll, but she was recovering slowly. "The data core is stable again," she said, "but I can sense something out there. The void isn't empty." "Yeah, that's what worries me." Jackson adjusted their course as space itself seemed to twist around them. "Nova didn't mention what happened to all the ships that disappeared here over the years." A massive shape loomed in the darkness, the broken hull of an ancient dreadnought, its surface scarred by weapons that hadn't been used in centuries. As they passed, other wrecks became visible, creating a graveyard of lost vessels stretching into the void. "Hegemony vessels detected," Arya announced. 3 pursuit craft entering the Reach." Jackson smiled grimly. "They must be desperate. Even their best pilots avoid this place." He glanced at Nyx. "Think you're up for some emergency repairs if things get rough?" Before she could answer, space rippled around them. A burst of energy from one of the anomalies caught their port engine, sending them spinning. Nyx's crystals flared as she instinctively reached out, her power helping to stabilize the damaged systems. "They're not just following," she said, her silver eyes wide. "They're hurting us, these distortions. They're not all natural." Jackson swore as he recognized the pattern. "They've seeded the Reach with quantum mines. They're trying to force us into a kill zone. A blast from the nearest pursuit ship grazed their shields. The Phantom dove deeper into the void, weaving between floating debris and spatial distortions. Each maneuver brought them closer to what looked like a massive tear in space itself. "Jackson," Nix said quietly, "I might have an idea, but it's extremely dangerous. More dangerous than flying through a quantum minefield." She touched the data core embedded in her palm. "My people didn't just manipulate matter. We learned to channel energy, to reshape reality itself in small ways. If I can interface with your ship systems, amplify the effect." "You're talking about trying to control these anomalies," Jackson stared at her. "That could kill you." "So could they?" She nodded toward the pursuing ships. "Sometimes the only way to survive is to embrace the void." Another hit rocked the ship. Warning lights flashed across every console. Jackson looked at Nix for a long moment, then nodded. "Arya, give her full system access, whatever she needs." Nix placed her hands on the ship's controls. Her crystals began to glow with increasing intensity, the light taking on an otherworldly quality. The data core pulsed in sync with the ship systems as she channeled its power. Space twisted around them, but this time it felt different, controlled. The quantum anomalies responded to Nix's power, creating a path through the chaos. The pursuing ships fired again, but their weapons were caught in the distortions, energy dissipating harmlessly. "It's beautiful," Nix whispered, her voice strained. Streams of energy flowed between her crystals and the ship's systems, turning the Phantom into something more than just a vessel. "But I can't hold it for long." Jackson pushed the engines to maximum. "You don't have to look." Through the twisting void ahead, a familiar sight appeared, the Meridian Sector beacon, its signal barely visible but unmistakable. They'd made it through the reach. The pursuing ships weren't so fortunate. Without Nix's guidance, they were caught in the quantum currents, their hulls torn apart by forces they couldn't control. Jackson didn't look back as they disappeared into the void. Nix collapsed back into her seat, her crystals dimming to a faint glow. The data core in her palm pulsed once more, then stabilized. "Well," she said weakly, "that was interesting." Jackson laughed. "Interesting? You just turned my ship into a quantum anomaly surfer. I think we passed interesting a few light years back." His expression softened. "Thank you for trusting me with your secret, for trusting me at all. You could have turned me in at any point, could have taken the hegemony's reward." She smiled slightly. "I suppose we both made questionably logical choices." The Meridian Sector sprawled before them, its heavily patrolled borders now a welcome sight. Jackson set course for the Federation Council Station, where Nix's evidence would finally be heard. "You know," he said, "after this is over, I could use a co-pilot, someone who really understands the ship systems. The salvage business isn't always exciting, but—" "Are you offering me a job, Jackson Reed?" "More like a partnership," he grinned. "Besides, I have a feeling Nova's going to have more work for us once the hegemony's secrets come out." Nix's crystals pulsed with gentle amusement. "A human salvage pilot and a luminary crystal tech. The universe may not be ready for that combination." "Good," Jackson said as they approached the council station. "I hate being predictable." Behind them, the void reach swirled with quantum energy, its mysteries unchanged. But for those who knew where to look, a new path had been carved through its chaos, a testament to the power of trust between two unlikely allies who chose to face the darkness together.